Hi, welcome everyone to this webinar by CoStar on finding opportunities in your real estate portfolio with market data and analytics. We will hear from two experts from CoStar today about how having direct, unlimited, and on-demand access to commercial real estate market data and analytics empowers real estate teams to find portfolio opportunities. I'd like to introduce our two speakers today. First, we have David Gibson, Vice President at CoStar. Dave brings more than 25 years of technology and sales leadership experience to CoStar. He leads a team of sales executives, software engineers, and marketing professionals who are dedicated to servicing the market data, analytics, and management software needs of tenant real estate and accounting teams. Next, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Cohen, Senior Learning and Development Specialist at CoStar. Stephanie is a subject matter expert on CoStar's comprehensive market data and analytics and has led the learning and skills development for hundreds of CoStar associates for the past 4 years. She joined CoStar in 2013 as a sales executive, working with brokers, owners, tenants, lenders, and appraisers. And with that, I'd like to hand things over to Dave and Stephanie.
There we go. I unmuted the laptop, but not the Zoom. So, hey, thanks everybody for joining us today. As Sonali said, I'm Dave Gibson, and I'm joined by Stephanie today. We're going to share a bunch of information with you that we think is of great benefit to retailers and corporate tenants, and how those companies like you are finding opportunities within their the real estate portfolios to leverage CoStar's market data and analytics. So there's a lot going on in the market. I don't have to tell the audience today that there is space consolidation, there are mergers, acquisitions, divestitures. You're being asked by executives to better optimize your space and right-size your space, optimize utilization and the cost of utilization. Some of you may be involved in acquisition or distribution if you have owned properties. So there's a tremendous amount of motion in the marketplace today, exacerbated, of course, by the effects of COVID and how that's affecting commercial real estate portfolios, both long-term and in the short term. What our customers tell us is when they have direct access to CoStar data on demand and updated, because our information is updated very frequently, there are a lot of different things that they can do. They spend more time performing comprehensive market analysis. They're brokers for the most part. And many of you may be brokers online today. You have access to the very same information. So corporate entities as well as retailers along with their brokers can collaborate more effectively. Essentially, they use CoStar data to deliver more business value, whether that's optimizing renewals, whether that is supplying information reports to internal stakeholders to prove they got great deals. They make more confident decisions and drive value through their real estate portfolios. So let's take a look at the data itself, because most companies want to know about the data, where it comes from, how it's gathered, and so forth. So CoStar is a very large investor in this topic. We've invested over $2.5 billion in the collection and ongoing maintenance of commercial real estate data in North America and beyond. Today we have about almost 180,000 users, if you look there to the lower left, who confirm there's a lot of value in this information as they try to drive the decisions within their organizations. If we look at the information, we have essentially the largest research organization in North America focused on this topic. And this is a large resource profile that you see here. We have over 650 researchers and analysts who are constantly gathering and updating information. If you look lower right, almost 1,500 client relationships and consultants that are also providing information into our platforms, talking to owners, brokers, lenders, surveying information in the field. If you look to the left, we have an entire fleet of in-market canvassers who are looking at properties physically, taking photos, taking videos, walking properties, asking questions. We have a fleet of drones and a fleet of airplanes doing the same thing. So we always know, for example, what new construction projects are on the ground in particular areas. And then finally, if you look to the upper right, we take all that information that we gather and collect and we analyze it and process it and turn it into useful reports and analytics for you to consume. So what's the result? If you look at all of that activity in total, what does it give you? It gives you access to over 6 million commercial properties and the deep information I talked about on the previous slide for each of those properties. Particularly valuable for the group of people that are on today's call, accessed almost 8.5 million now lease comps. So you're able to understand what the lease comps look like in the markets and submarkets that you're focused on. Also about 8 million tenants profiled in the marketplace so that you understand who occupies buildings, where other competitive or complementary tenants are, where co-tenant relationships exist, and so forth. So deep information across all real estate classes, whether that's office real estate, retail, or industrial and warehouse information. So we gather all this information with the resources that I spoke about. This is the result, but there's more than that. We also add third-party information. Part of the value of the CoStar platform to companies like yours is that we bring in this third-party information and we layer it with the information I just spoke about. Demographic information, walkability scores and transit scores when you're trying to locate that perfect office space in a metropolitan area. Economic data from Oxford Economics if you're trying to get information about local incomes and other economic information about geography. So whether you're a retailer evaluating a location, needing walkability scores and local economics, and also co-tenancy information, or whether you're a corporate customer who is evaluating that next best office space, this information layers into the information that I talked about before. So as I mentioned, those analysts and economists take this information, and what they do is they process it for you. You can imagine by looking at all this information, you couldn't consume it in an effective way if we didn't package it in a way that you could make decisions with it. So the economists and the analysts take all the information and process it. We consolidate it into markets and submarkets for submarket reports. There are over 12,000 submarket reports across North America that dive deep into those submarkets, availabilities, rents, trends, and forecasts. 63,000 forecast scenarios where you can dial into the forecast periods that you're trying to assess and make your best decisions on renewals or new space. And you can even project your occupancy costs long term, even if you're not at the end of your lease or the end of your lease is quite some time out. So a tremendous amount of information here in terms of forward-looking information and analytics about submarkets. So we're also investing outside of North America. In previous years, CoStar has been principally a North American-based company with our data. Today, we have comprehensive information on the UK and Ireland, but we're expanding aggressively into Western Europe with Spain, Italy, France, and Germany, and then to Eastern Europe and then to Asia. So this is a multi-year journey, but for those of you that are on today's call that are multinationals, we have a number of customers today using our information. They're multinational companies with office or retail locations all over the world. They're gaining even more business value as we expand the footprint of information beyond North America. So who internally benefits in your organization? So what we find from companies like yours is that there are a number of users within the organization that can use the information, and a number of use cases where they can drive value from the data. So whether that's real estate teams, transaction managers, leaders in real estate, lease administrators on the real estate team, whether that is portfolio managers on the real estate team. We even find that there are users in accounting and finance who are trying to do things like value assets for their accounting practices, or do some fair market value analysis for lease accounting, or those kinds of things. And these different users combine together for, again, a number of different use cases, whether that's strategic planning and decision-making, whether that is simply getting your very best deal on your next renewal, whether that is being first to the very best deal in the marketplace, whether that is evaluating sublease opportunities, because there are more sublease opportunities in the market than ever before, and some of them are priced in a really, really advantaged way. You know, whether that's finding some underwriting information if you are an owner of property. So as we work with our customers, they tell us, and it's very situational about their business, there are many use cases across organizations, depending on the nature of your organization, what is happening in your real estate portfolio, and what the role is in the organization. So how else might the data help you? Some of our customers tell us that one of the big advantages is when they're doing merger or acquisition investigation and really not quite ready to involve their broker or anybody in the public domain, because they're looking at what if scenarios, but they still need deep information about the markets and locations related to merger or divestiture activity without having outside help quite yet as they're doing that strategic planning. And then also, I've already mentioned this in my comments, we find more and more that when corporate tenants and retailers both have access to CoStar data, the collaboration is faster, it's more effective, you get first to the best deals, and you and brokers converge together faster on the needs that you have in particular markets and submarkets. It simply takes much of the delay out of an interaction between the broker community and corporate tenants and retailers, and helps everyone be much more effective and optimize the time associated with their work together. So in closing with my remarks, I would also say that one of the reasons we're here today and speaking to this group is a number of companies just like yours are already driving this value. They're doing so in many, many different industries. Both retailers as well as corporate tenant customers of ours, as well as industrial tenant customers of ours, are using the data today to drive the kind of value that I've spoken about in my comments. And so what I'd like to do is, as I'm going to transition over to Stephanie. She's going to share a few examples with you about how that's happening today. Now, we certainly won't, in the time that's limited for us today, get through all those examples, but we'll certainly be able to share some really prominent things with you. So I will transition over to Stephanie, and she'll give you a look at the CoStar data and analytics product.
Thank you, Dave. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, let me share my screen. Not that one. Okay. Everyone see? Are we good to go? Okay, perfect. So thanks, Dave. Very excited to be here. Thank you all, Cornet, for having us here and speaking with you today. I'd like to go ahead and just jump right in. We only have a limited amount of time, and I have a lot of stuff that I'd like to go through. I'm just curious who's still with us on the line. If you know how to give a virtual thumbs up, feel free to drop that in the chat as well. And then also let us know where you're dialing in from. I'm always curious to see you in a virtual world where everyone is joining in. We're all here in Atlanta. I'm from the South, and so I'm enjoying the warmer winter weather right now. So hopefully you are here and with us all in good health today. So one of the things that came to my mind when I was asked to create a presentation of data and information was how I was going to condense hours of content and use cases into a 30-minute window. And so today I'm going to focus on the office market in particular, but I just want to keep in mind, I want you all to keep in mind that what I showed today is also repeatable, and you can look at this from a retail perspective, an industrial perspective, hospitality. Really, truly, our CoStar database tracks every commercial asset in the market. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and move on. A couple of weeks ago, I had an interesting conversation with one of our office economists, and I want to share with you what I learned from that conversation, and hopefully, will spark some curiosity in trying to understand what the market looks like, regardless of the asset class that you're managing in your portfolio. So what we're looking at here are some of the key fundamental drivers that determine the health of a real estate cycle. In particular, we're looking at the office dynamics here. And so what you can see in terms of demand, you can see the downward demand cycles in 09, particularly. That's when we were coming out of the 08, 09 recession. And then demand just kind of slowly creeped back up, as opposed to previous cycles in the mid 2000s and maybe even the 90s, where we saw quite a significant demand in office space. And I'm just curious, I can see some of the chats coming through, and you all are probably a lot smarter than me on this line, but what I found and what I asked the economists, what's driving the slow demand recovery? And I'm curious to know if anybody has an idea as to what that driver might have been or continues to be. See if I can look at the chat here. Oh, we've got Sao Paulo, Los Angeles, Concord. Anybody want to guess why we're seeing a slow recovery in demand for office space? Many working from home. Yep. I would say that's probably true, particularly when we're looking at 2020 and 2021. So what was interesting is it's in fact the age demographic, the working age demographic. Thinking about the baby boomers and how large that population was, particularly in the 80s and the 90s. And then as the baby boomers are now retiring from the workforce, the following generations are less populated. And so therefore less population growth means that there's less demand in office space. We're also seeing companies, as Dave mentioned earlier, that are consolidating space and they're moving to more efficient locations within a market or a submarket, and maybe finding higher rents, but in a location that's easier to be accessible to their employees. In addition, you can see some of the supply metrics here. So again, in mid 2000s, probably early 90s, we saw a lot of, because there was demand, we also saw a lot of construction happening and a lot of supply hit the market. What we're seeing now is a slower supply and slower construction happening in the marketplace. And so therefore, ultimately, at the end of the day, what this means is, it's going to help mitigate the pressure for vacancy. Less supply equals less vacancy in the market. Additionally, what's interesting about my conversation is the fact that the type of space that's in demand right now is actually Class A 4- and 5-star buildings. And so again, when we're talking about seeing this migration of companies who are consolidating space or moving to different locations, maybe considering lease renewals or space alternatives, we're seeing those companies and organizations migrate more to those higher quality spaces. Number one, because there's a lot of space that's available right now, either direct space and even sublet space that's hit the market, where companies and organizations are really leveraging the information to negotiate really good deals for their organization and within the real estate portfolio. So that led me down, believe it or not, a rabbit hole of researching the office market. And I won't take you down many of those rabbit holes, but one thing that came to mind as I sit here in Atlanta, and as many of you join us from other parts of the country and maybe even the globe, is how in the heck are you guys finding these needles in the haystack? How are companies figuring out where they need to go, where their business is going to thrive, where their employees want to go to work, where they can recruit talent, where they can keep talent? It just seems so complex, especially when you jump into CoStar or any database for that matter, and you see the amount of information that's available via technology. And so 452 markets globally. I'm just going to focus on the US, but you can see here the markets that we are covering. And if I wanted to simply decide on a few markets that are pretty popular right now, we're seeing a migration of companies that are moving into what they call the Sun Belt. And so if you take markets like Miami, you're looking at Nashville, you're looking at Charlotte and Atlanta, we can start looking at some of these market fundamentals and start getting a picture of which markets might be most affordable or cost effective to operate a business. And again, where we can attract top talent and where employees might want to go into the office as they start their workday. What's interesting here is when I look at Miami, Nashville, Charlotte, and Atlanta, Miami always stands out as the market with the highest rents. Anybody want to take a guess why Miami tends to have the highest market rents as compared to some of their peer markets? I'm going to open up the chat. Less square footage per person, offices moved to an open plan. Yes, definitely a change in the office dynamics and the employee dynamics, Karen. It's a great observation. Companies are finding out that working from home is more efficient. Absolutely, absolutely. So anybody want to take a guess as to why market rents are so high in Miami? There's a major event that happens every single year in Florida. How about hurricane season? Yes, hurricane season. And so in Florida, Miami in particular, the insurance is pretty much baked into their rental costs, which is why you see high rental rates in the Miami market. So a little fun fact there. So you can see that, of course, Miami outranks Nashville, Charlotte, and Atlanta, but those Nashville, Charlotte, and Atlanta from a market rent per square foot seem to be pretty in line with one another, and maybe a viable option in terms of a market that we might be looking to penetrate. In line with that, you can see vacancy, and typically when you see high rental rates, you might actually see low vacancy, because that sort of speaks to the demand of the market. You know, as you can see here, which is interesting, Miami, although has the highest market rents, they still fall in line, and they go pretty toe to toe with the other markets in terms of vacancy. On the flip side, you can see that Atlanta actually has pretty high vacancy. And if we go to the next slide, you can see what the absorption rates look like in these four markets. And Atlanta took a pretty hard hit as we were going into the pandemic in 2020, and then still recovering here in 2021. But you can see in the forecast, as Dave mentioned earlier, that we're projecting Atlanta to kind of recover fully as we enter into 23, 24, 25, and 26. Additionally, if we look at another driver would be under construction. So again, this just talks about what other space it is potentially an option in the future. What space might we be competing with, or might the landlord be competing with, and how can we utilize this information to figure out which area we want to be in. So let's go into Nashville. I'm just picking Nashville. Number one is I love Nash Vegas. I lived there for a little over a year, so I'm somewhat familiar with it. But I also have friends that over the past 10 years keep telling me to come back to Nashville because it's just changed dramatically. There's a lot of construction happening, and I thought it would be a fun exercise to just take a look at Nashville. But keep in mind, this is applicable for any town, any submarket, any market, USA or globally. And so what I'm looking at here are all of our submarkets. And similarly, I can still look at those market fundamentals from a submarket level. And I've just chosen in Nashville, Weston, downtown Green Hills, Cool Springs, and Brentwood. So either, you know, this could be a situation where the strategy is, you know, hey, we're looking at 12 to 18 months in advance. We have 20 renewals on the books, or maybe this is a situation where we can consolidate space, look for a more efficient space in a downtown metropolitan area, or let's renew some of the space that we have, but let's leverage the data and information and kind of work with our brokers on how best to negotiate the best lease or renewal rate and options for us. So again, as I scroll through here, you can see vacancy rates and how downtown is pretty much flourishing. They had high vacancy back in 13, but with all the things happening in Nashville, you can see that trend has gone down, and they're pretty in line with the rest of the submarkets in Nashville. The same with absorption. So if we're looking at this from a demand perspective, where are companies and organizations moving? Well, we're seeing that they're moving into the downtown area. So we see that replicated in positive absorption here and in the future as well. So might be a place that we definitely want to focus and take a long-term look at. Under construction, Nashville downtown is hopping. And again, I think it speaks to just the accessibility of the city. So when you're looking at those organizations that are migrating from California and New York, it's really hard for their employees to get into those offices. They have to rely on public transportation in order to get there. However, in more of the Sunbelt states where you have Austin, you might have Dallas, you're looking at Charlotte, we're looking at Nashville, Atlanta, it's a lot easier and more accessible for employees to get into the workplace. So let's figure out, like, if we have an understanding of the market fundamentals and the market conditions, what's out there in the market. I'm sure most of you have heard of LoopNet before. A lot of clients are using LoopNet. It's a great marketing platform. It's where people get the most exposure on space that they have available for lease in the marketplace or buildings for sale. What's interesting is that because it's a marketplace, it's only you're only seeing about 40% of what's actually available in the market. So with something like a CoStar database where you're tracking every single commercial property in the market, you're going to get full visibility to the inventory and space alternatives that might be available to you, in addition to sublet space, which is pretty popular right now. I just did a quick search here. I'm looking at anything that's for lease of office space between 80 and 100,000 square feet. And again, my story is basically the assumption that we're looking at moving we're consolidating space. We're looking at moving to a more strategic location. We might be paying a little bit more higher in rent, but because of our consolidation, it's probably a wash, or we could be saving some money in some cases. Very quickly, when I apply these filters, I go from seeing hundreds of properties down to 8 properties that have multiple spaces within those. And then if I switch over to analytics, again, we can quickly understand within these 2 submarkets, downtown and Green Hills, we can see that our sublet inventory is about 141 square feet. If you see that under here on the availability column, we can see that the average market rents are about $35 a square foot. And if you remember when we were looking at the other analytics, that's pretty much in line. Everything in that particular area was roughly $30 or more. Both of these markets combined have an average vacancy rate of 40%. And we can also see that space is staying on the market for about 16 months at that dollar amount. So again, lots of really great information that we could potentially leverage and have meaningful conversations, with whoever's managing the real estate portfolio, and really strategize to the best outcome for our corporation. If we switch back over to the map view, again, we can jump into any property, and this is really where CoStar is. This is our bread and butter. As Dave mentioned earlier, there's a lot of investment that goes into research and technology, and everything that we capture when we're talking to and doing interviews with brokers, when we're interviewing owners, we're interviewing developers. We gather this information and we consolidate it and put it in this beautiful format for you to consume. So quickly, I can see that this is a 5-star building. We're looking at 1600 West End Avenue. The building is called Broad West. It's in the West End submarket. You can see that I have about 2,500 spaces available for parking, which is great because if I have to consider the amount of employees that are coming back into the office, I want to make sure that they have a place to park and can access the building easily. Scrolling through some of the tabs at the top here and really diving into the details around a property, we can take a look at what's actually for lease in the building itself. So here we can see that there's a lot of square footage. If you remember, I added the 80 to 100,000 square feet available. Although this building doesn't have it contiguous in one floor, we can see that there is quite a few spaces or floors that are available that might fit our needs, and maybe we can be in the building on different floors. I can click on a particular space, and what's really interesting here is the fact that we can highlight the update date. So here you can see that we've just talked to JLL on January 7th, or I'm sorry, January 4th, which was a couple of weeks ago. So everything in the database, if you're wondering how often it's updated, it's every 30 to 45 days that we're talking to people and updating listings. In some cases, it's more frequent than that. As I scroll through, I can also get a good visual as lease comps. Again, what's the demand of this particular building and who's actually signing leases in this property or at this property. And so we can see last year between May and November, there was quite a bit of activity in this building, probably because it's very beautiful, number one, and there's a lot of amenities, and you'll see that as we get to the photos here in a little while. Below, you can see a stacking plan, so really gives you a great visual as to where other tenants in the building are located and then what floors are available what spaces are available in the property. The peer tab is interesting because unlike the results list from our initial search and filters, we're now looking at properties that other brokers and other tenants are looking at in the CoStar database that are very comparable to our subject building. So you can see here that my vacancy rate among its peers is actually almost half of what the Green Hills and the Nashville market look like. We're actually looking at a 26% vacancy rate between 17 buildings. And then we're also seeing a higher rental rate here. So that kind of is in line with Economics 101. We have a lower vacancy rate that's driving the higher rental rates. Then again, if I switch back out, I can toggle over to the tenant tab and then still see a stacking plan of where those tenants are located. I can also see who I might be competing with in the building or what companies might be helping drive business to my business, and what complements all of our organizations in the same property, if you will. If I then switch over to demographics, so again, I'm able to see from a 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 mile radius, things like population, daytime employment, consumer spending, traffic counts. So as I said in the beginning, this isn't just applicable for office. We can look at this from a retail perspective as well as an industrial perspective and hospitality, multifamily, et cetera. If I'm sitting here in Atlanta and I have no clue of what's going on in Nashville, but I need to make a short list of properties and tours before I head into the marketplace, I can just jump into the images tab here and take a look at some of the high quality images that we've taken from our field research team. We have interior and photos, exterior and photos. So again, I get a really good understanding of what this property feels like and looks like, and can start envisioning my company occupying this particular space. And then again, I can switch to the map view, and the map view will then show us different retailers. I can overlay different heat maps in this example, just kind of thinking from a company standpoint, if I'm relocating individuals to a particular area, what does the housing market look like? Will my employees be able to have affordable housing options if they are to relocate to a specific area? And you can see that displayed here in the median home values. All right, and then lastly, what's most important is that sometimes in just in conversations with other companies, they're strategizing at least 12 to 18 months in advance. And in those cases, what you can do is you have the ability to actually save a search like this. So if this was a market, maybe you didn't find the exact building you're looking for, or the space that you're looking for, you can always save these searches and create reports, share them with anybody else that has a CoStar subscription. So if you're looking or working in tandem with your brokers, if you're doing things internally as a team, anybody that has a CoStar, anybody that has access to CoStar would be able to share reports and save those reports among team members. Multiple different reports in the system. I'm sure that I'm assuming that most of you have seen CoStar reports at some point in time in your real estate career. And then, very easily you can customize these and make them proprietary to your organization. And then lastly, the ability to export the data and information. Some people like me are data nerds, and I like to look at, the numbers and how, what the market may have looked like 10 years ago when we first executed the lease compared to what the market looks like now. And instead of looking at it in graph format, I can actually start manipulating the data in an Excel type of format. And with that, I hope that I was able to provide you with some information on data and technology and what's available in the market. Does anyone have any questions for me about market data and analytics? Let's see any coming through. I'm gonna keep those questions coming in. If you think of any, I'll keep an eye on the chat. I'm gonna turn it back over to.
Thanks, Stephanie. And gosh, that's a lot to think about in a short period of time. There's so much in the CoStar platform. for customers to use and to drive value in their portfolios. Can you see my screen, Convi? Okay, hold on just a moment. Okay, good. So it looked like it wasn't sharing, so we're good. We're good there. Okay, great. So to wrap us up, so first reinforce what Stephanie said at the end. We have some time, a bit of time for some questions. 2 slides to share with you here in closing. So we are with CoStar Real Estate Manager. If you look there in the lower right-hand corner, and CoStar Real Estate Manager is the part of CoStar that is focused particularly on providing CoStar data platform and solutions to retailers, corporate tenants, and industrial tenants, supplying both applications, things like lease administration, lease accounting, portfolio management, portfolio planning, and then CoStar data, which you have seen today. CoStar Real Estate Manager is a part of, obviously, the larger CoStar group. Many of you have used or have seen LoopNet and are probably active users of LoopNet. CoStar also owns apartments.com, which is a very prevalent brand in the marketplace and brings in a tremendous amount of information about the apartment real estate market, and a number of other properties that are part of the CoStar family. So a little bit of context around who we are, CoStar Real Estate Manager, and we are particularly focused on corporate tenants, retailers, and industrial tenants.